That's okay. Here is a picture of sort of the vessels and the vascular tree. We've got the heart at the top. On the right is blood leaving the heart. It goes into arteries, right? Arteries then flow away from the heart. They go out, they branch off, they get smaller and smaller. They become arterioles, right? Here, each arteriole branches off a bunch and eventually goes down to these very, very tiny vessels called capillaries that are only so big that one red blood cell at a time can fit through. Pretty cool. Then the capillaries sort of come back together, make things called venules. The venules then eventually come to get together and form these large veins that are going to bring the blood back to the heart. Okay. There's something about arteries and especially arterioles that make them special and allow for their ability to change their diameter by constricting or dilating. That's what we're going to talk about next. Okay. Does anybody remember or know what it is about an arteriole or an artery that lets it do that? Veins generally don't do this very much. Venules can't do this very much. Capillaries sure as hell can't do it. There's something special about it. There's a special structure as we again fall back into structure imparting function. Anybody remember? It's not surfactant. So it's a good guess. It's a good guess, but it's not surfactant. They are elastic. They do have collagen. That's close. They have a good ability to be able to be stretched and come back. But that's pretty similar between arteries and veins. Veins also have to be kind of stretchy in that way because of the cyclic nature of the change in pressure, because we get contraction or relaxation in the heart. We're getting close, though. We're getting close. It's not muscle fibers, although that's a good guess. The lumen, there's a special thing about the lumen. There's a special thing. So the lumen is the inside area, right? That open area inside. If you will look, right, it's kind of hard to see on this one because they're kind of the same, but there's something special about the inside of an artery and an arteriole. Okay. And you can see it better here. And what it is this. Okay. It's this idea of the layer of cells on the inside of the arteries and arterioles. It's called the endothelium. And then outside of the endothelium, in that kind of red area, is something called smooth muscle, which is regular muscle. It functions like it has sarcomeres and things, but because it's smooth muscle, it's your roommate who doesn't do the dishes. It's just stuff strewn out all over the place. It's Ellis's room, where you clean it and then she comes in and like gets stuff out. It's just everywhere. Okay, and so it's not very organized. But what happens is the endothelium can respond to different things. And it signals then to the smooth muscle to tell the smooth muscle to contract or relax and change the inside, the internal diameter or the size of the lumen of the artery and arteriole. Veins have an endothelium, veins have a little bit of smooth muscle, but it's much, much less responsive to all of these different things. Okay? Okay. So that's the special part of all of this. Okay. Here's an arteriolar network. You can see skeletal muscle and things on the outside, but they put some dye in and then they've taken a high resolution microscopic look. These large things here are arterioles, but you will note that an arteriole then becomes a secondary arteriole. They branch off of each other perpendicularly. So you've got an arteriole, primary one, and you get secondary ones that come off at roughly a right angle, and then the tertiary and third order arterioles then branch off of the second, back going that way, so on and so forth. And so you end up with this, we call an arteriolar tree. It looks like a tree, like the branches of a tree, and they spread all the way out to what are called terminal arterioles, which then lead into the capillaries. Okay. And so you can imagine a scenario whereby if I change the diameter up here in the big arteriole, if I squish down the diameter there and less blood gets through, then less blood makes it to every place downstream. Or if conversely, I dilate that primary arteriole and I make more blood able to go through, then more makes it down all the way throughout that entire tree and more makes it to the tissue. Okay? It's the same idea of what happens if you have blood clots, let's just say, in your coronary arteries. You get a blood clot in the coronary artery somewhere, and everything downstream that is sort of perfused by that coronary artery in the heart doesn't get any blood. Right? It gets pinched off, doesn't get any blood, so everything dies down there. You have a heart attack. It's the same idea. Okay? Same idea that we're going to see there. Okay. The other piece that I want to bring up here, and I'll show you a picture of it, that also makes the smooth muscle and the endothelium important, because it's part of the smooth muscle, is smooth muscle on arterioles has nerves throughout. It's what we call a plexus of perivascular sympathetic nerves. Sympathetic nerves release what as their neurotransmitters? Epinephrine and norepinephrine. So, when you get stressed and you release epinephrine and norepinephrine, as part of the sympathetic nervous system response, it will send a signal to the smooth muscle on your arterioles. So a sympathetic nervous system response actually leads to vasoconstriction in some tissues and vasodilation in others. We'll talk about that in just a little bit, okay? So let me show you guys a picture. Top picture is an arteriole with a secondary arteriole coming off of it, and those little rings that you see going around there looks like the Michelin tire man, okay, or a 3-month-old baby, okay. I'm not at all nostalgic about that. That is vascular smooth muscle. It's these little rings of muscle that surround the arteriole, and they can squeeze down and make it smaller, or they can relax and let it get bigger. Okay. Next, if you take the smooth muscle and you dissolve that away, and then you dissolve away the layers of the arteriole itself as well, you're left with what you see in this picture. This is stain where those sympathetic, that perivascular plexus has been stained. And so you can see all of the sympathetic nervous system nerve endings that are going to be sort of adjacent to or associated with that smooth muscle. Okay. So arterioles are highly innervated by the sympathetic nervous system. So this is one of the ways. It's not the only way, but this is one of the ways that we can tell arterioles to constrict or relax and change the pressure inside, and therefore change or adjust how much blood makes it through them. Okay? How much blood makes it through. This is the equation that explains why blood moves high pressure to low pressure. Okay. You don't have to know this equation. Okay, you don't have to know, but I want to at least present it to you because I think it's an important kind of beginning piece for why changing the diameter in those arterioles has such a profound effect in blood. This equation says that blood pressure is equal to cardiac output multiplied by a variable called total peripheral resistance. Peripheral resistance, so if anybody had physics 2? Some of you are nodding your heads. You made it through, you're in it right now, it's terrible, right? Physics 1 makes, to me at least, makes total sense. Velocity, acceleration, even the weird, crazy angle, like you can see it, you do it every day. I apply force, I have some momentum because of gravity, and it does this. Physics 2, it's electricity and it's magnets, and that shit is all backwards, right? If you want electricity or a fluid to go faster, you have to lower certain things. Rather than raising things, it goes down. When resistance falls, more things go through. So summatively, that kind of makes sense. But what we do is peripheral resistance is a kind of global measure of how constricted or dilated the arteriolar tree actually is, or in certain tissues. I'll show you guys a little bit more. Okay. When we make the resistance higher, we vasoconstrict. Shrink the diameters, resistance goes up. Okay. When resistance goes up, at the same cardiac output, when resistance goes up, the pressure goes up. Okay. We remember blood moves from high to low pressure. So if I raise peripheral resistance in a given tissue, for the same cardiac output, the blood pressure in that tissue goes up, which means the difference in pressure from the aorta to that tissue has gotten smaller. Okay. We're getting to this place. Any of you guys ever like shot water out of the end of a hose? Right? You put your thumb or your finger over the end of the hose. What you are doing is it's the same water coming out of the faucet, but by shrinking the diameter of the opening, you make the resistance higher. Water coming from your faucet, its cardiac output is the same. So the pressure at that place goes up, and that's what makes the water shoot out. Okay? That's what makes the water shoot out. Is you change the pressure. That's the same idea. Okay? What I don't want you guys to do, I like that example because you've done that and you've seen that. But what I want you to appreciate is that at a given tissue has its own peripheral resistance. And so for any cardiac output that's determined by the heart, okay, by heart rate and stroke volume, as each tissue changes its peripheral resistance, it changes the blood pressure in that tissue. Okay, in that tissue. So there's some aortic pressure, and then this is the blood pressure in that tissue, and we need there to be some difference between those two if we want blood to go there. Now, if you vasoconstrict enough everywhere in your body, it makes your aortic pressure, right? It's hard to move things. A year from now, we can, maybe a year and a half from now, when we can have lab every week with this class, we'll demonstrate this by having you guys do something called a cold pressure test. You'll take your hand, stick your hand in a bowl of ice water, and we measure your blood pressure. You put your hand in, you get this giant spike in epinephrine and norepinephrine, and your blood pressure immediately shoots up because you raise peripheral resistance everywhere. And because it goes up everywhere, we have to raise aortic pressure or no blood will move whatsoever. So you get this big bump. Okay? It's called a cold pressure test. It's not the most fun thing in the world, apparently, right? I have a bad ankle. So I spent a good portion of my high school life with my foot in a bucket of ice water. I stepped on a baseball while running at full speed when I was a junior in high school. Basically did everything I could except for tear the ligaments a little bit better. if I torn them. So like I'll walk around now and just like fall over because my ankle tendons are really loose and everything. It's pretty terrible, but I'm kind of immune to that. I've lost my sensitivity to those things. In regular people, some folks can only put their hand in for like 30 seconds or a minute. We use it as a way to measure changes in pain sensitivity in the lab. And some people are like, oh, that hurts. It's been like 90 seconds. Please take it out. And I'm like, you can make it like for like an hour. It's fine. Okay. So, do your cold plunge. Those of you that have your own cold plunge tubs, you know who you are. Okay. Do your cold plunge. What you get is a giant spike in blood pressure when you hop in. That's kind of why it refreshes you and makes you feel awake. Okay. Now, I'm sorry, more math. I apologize. It's just algebra. It's just algebra. Okay. But more physics too. This is how we control or why mathematically small changes in vessel diameter have huge effects on peripheral resistance and therefore blood flow. What you see at the top is something called Ohm's law. Ohm's law describes that flow of a fluid or of air to a certain place is equal to the change or the difference in pressure from one side to the other of that tissue. So aortic pressure versus pressure in the tissue divided by the resistance to those things. So as the pressure gradient increases, you get more flow. You can increase the pressure gradient by lowering the pressure across that vessel by dilating, or also by lowering the resistance, which also happens by dilating. Okay, that's Ohm's law. Then there's something called Poiseuille's law, which is going to explain how we calculate resistance in the denominator of Ohm's law. It's more complicated, but I'll walk you through it. There's only one variable that matters in Poiseuille's law. Poiseuille's law tells us that resistance is equal to 8, which is a constant, multiplied by N, which is the viscosity of the fluid. Your blood has a viscosity to it, right? It's thicker, it's a little sludgier compared to like water. Also constant, okay? 8 is constant, N, viscosity is constant, L is the length of your vessel, okay? Your vessel lengths don't change, also a constant. So the numerator of that equation does not change very much. The denominator is pi multiplied, because it's a circle, pi multiplied by the radius to the 4th power. Pi doesn't change. So in Poiseuille's law, the only thing that we can change that matters is the radius of the arteriole. And because it's to the 4th power, we don't have to change it very much, and we can get giant changes in resistance. Okay. So when you put those things together, using what's called Poiseuille's equation, it equates to flow. So blood flow to a tissue is equal to the difference in pressure from the aorta or the left ventricle to that tissue, multiplied by pi times the radius of the vessel to the 4th, divided by our constants here, which is the length of the vessels and viscosity and A. This is the same. Pi is the same. So basically, flow is equal to pressure multiplied by, or the difference in pressure multiplied by the radius to the 4th power. So when radius gets bigger, you vasodilate, radius goes up, it goes up to the 4th power, flow to that tissue can dramatically increase. Similarly, small bits of constriction, because it's to the 4th power, make flow go down. Okay, so dilated arteriole, constricted arteriole, kind of resting arteriole in the middle. So mathematically, based upon what we know of fluid dynamics and things, this is how and why changing the diameter of an arteriole drives basically where the blood is going to go in your body. Okay, so when you're resting, like right now, I see some of y'all getting sleepy. Not enough caffeine. Sorry, no more caffeine-free Diet Coke. Right? Okay. Flavored water, it's good, right? Spine. You're getting sleepy, blood here, right? Too much digestion. Not going other places. Stand up and we squat. Immediately we constrict to splenic, dilate to muscle, all the blood goes out. Okay. All the blood goes out.
Okay, we talked about this. We talked about this. We talked about smooth muscles. Yeah, I don't really have time for that. Okay.
We'll stop here. Monday, we will pick up talking about auto regulation and extrinsic neural control. Okay? All right. Y'all have a good weekend. Make good choices. If you wrote it out, turn it in, make sure everybody's name's on it. In the absence of that, email it to me. Make sure everybody's name's on it.